in the last few years, lot many reforms have taken place in the evaluation, or no, I shouldn't say evaluation, in the assessment of students. So let's see what our speakers have to say, how they are taking assessment in the school sector. So now I invite Dr. Basheerhamad Shadrach. He is a country director, TESS India, Open University, UK. Dr. Bashir Mahmood is not really talking about assessment of students, he is talking about preparation of teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. My apologies. I don't know why I was slotted in this particular session. My talk is more or less on how to prepare the teachers for tomorrow. I want to introduce once again the Open University. As many of you may know, the Open University in the UK is one of the world's first and the largest universities. There's a joke in the UK which goes on like this, that you would, if you walk into any street in the UK, you would find at least one person studying in the Open University. So, although Indira Gandhi National Open University in India is very large, I know that there are about 2 million students studying, but a country of 62 million, a student in every street is not a bad thing. But what difference does Open University make in the lives of those in the UK is that it allows them to study at their own pace, study the subjects that they want, and it actually breaks all the stereotypes. So the distance education movement around the world was in one way or the other influenced by the Open University, and I'm glad that this university is now in India in the form of support to the Indian system. So, as you can see, the mission of the Open University is to be open to people, places, methods, and ideas. So it's not restrictive. It's not a university that asks you to follow a particular path, an academic stream. You know, you can mix and match your own subjects. If you are pursuing humanities and you want to pursue biotechnology, Open University allows you to do that. In quite a few occasions, in many systems, it is not possible. So why we are here as Open University? The Indian and the UK governments agreed at some stage in April 2006 to help each other in areas of excellence. And this was a kind of a UK-India partnership in education. And they found that you know, concentrating on education was a good idea. So when David Cameron was here 2 years ago, this initial agreement of collaborating for 5 years was extended for another 5 years. So the collaboration between India and the UK in education exchange and exchange of ideas, research, and technical assistance would continue till 2016. So When the UK government went back, they scouted for institutions that can offer some support to the Indian problems. And here is where they identified as one of the problems, the challenges that India was facing was in the area of teacher education. And they chose the Open University in the UK to come and intervene as a bilateral agreement. So, what are the problems? I don't need to preach or speak to this slide at all because many of you are aware of this situation. This morning, Dr. Rashmi Shami very categorically mentioned that access is not a problem. You know, people are able to access, but I'm sure if you consider this particular state and certain states for say tribal population or population that comes from remotest locations, access still is a problem, but overall it appears to the government of India that access is not a major problem. But as it's enshrined in the curriculum framework, also the curriculum framework for teacher education 2009, as well as the RTE, the focus is more on equity and inclusion. So it is very clear that of the millions of students, 80% of those are studying in the government schools, and the quality remains as a huge concern. And when it comes to Madhya Pradesh, you can see that you have 50 districts, 318 blocks, you have 436,000 teachers who work in 137,000 schools. Now, there are 1.13 lakh schools, with 85% of your schools have Pakka buildings. I think you should be very happy in the state that as compared to many other states, you are doing really, really well. And at least you have 2 to 6 rooms on an average. And many schools have been established in the last 10 years. So that means 16% of your schools in Madhya Pradesh are constructed with nice brick and mortar, with conditions that are conducive. But that said, when it comes to teachers and teacher educators, the statistics is not telling a good story. 13% of the schools have head teachers who are qualified. 16% of your schools have only single teachers, whereas 55% of schools have more than 1:35 people teacher ratio. Although 92% of the schools are utilizing the TLM grant, only 80% of these are visited by the Circle Resource Center coordinators and Cluster Resource Center coordinators. You can see that when it comes to ICTs, only 2% of the primary schools have any sort of ICT in Madhya Pradesh of the overall average of 6.23. And school inspectors do not have the time to visit schools to offer the support that they could offer. So you can see that of the 317,000 teachers who are actually in place today, only 46% of them received some sort of in-service training, which means a good number of 54% of the teachers have not received any training. And of 160,000 of these are below 35. You can imagine a person below 35 who is really at the prime age of his or her life is put in a situation with not much training offered, not much support offered, at the same time is expected to deliver goods on a contractual basis with very limited pay. So that's the situation, and this is where we the foundation lies, right? This is how we want to build the future of India, particularly states like UP, MP, and so on. So it's not a really good situation. 72% of teachers have no professional qualification, whereas when it comes to academic qualification, more than half of your teachers have a PG, MA or MSc. When it comes to professional qualification, only 28% of your teachers have some sort of professional qualification. So both pre-service, in-service seem to be suffering in the state. Now, when it comes to the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Ms. Shami was here earlier. The 20 days compulsory training under the RTE that were to be offered to the in-service teachers, only 10 to 12 days many abhiyans are able to complete around the country. It's not because they don't want to utilize the thousands of crores that they are getting. It's simply because they don't have the resource people, they don't have the curriculum, they don't have enough material, enough trainers trained to train others. So what happens, the cluster resource centers, which are supposedly the venue for teacher training, have become godowns, at least for 1 month, for distribution of textbooks. And the CRC coordinators also are responsible for conducting sports events under the RTE and also the new framework. They also have to ensure a number of things, equity to inclusion to all observing all sorts of days at the circle level. So it becomes really difficult for the CRC coordinators to focus on the academic part of it, the curriculum part of it, the pedagogical part of support that they were expected to offer to the teachers. Whereas when it comes to inspection, they all seem to be doing at least one part well. They are counting well. They are able to go and see if there are toilets in the school, if there are rooms in good conditions. So the academic part is neglected, whereas the administrative part is really taken care of. Now the NUEPA releases good statistics. And if you look at the statistics, the quality of statistics that comes from Madhya Pradesh, a place like West Bengal, is quite high. People at the community level are able to collect statistics, feed data, send it online through email and other mechanisms. So the machinery is well oiled. You have a system in place, but when it comes to curriculum support, pedagogical support, the actual training that teachers need, in the earlier slide I showed that a number of schools have single teachers. If these teachers were to be supported, there's hardly any system. Now the diets and the CRTs in many of these states also have difficulties. If they focus on in-service, they tend to lose on pre-service. If they tend to focus on pre-service, they don't have a strategy for in-service. And they are limited with faculty. And there is, in certain states, the teacher trainers, who are the resource people, are under a political system, in the sense that the teacher unions handpick people who are deployed as resource people. So if you look at the overall situation in the country, teacher education is one area we seem to be wanting, we have an opportunity, I would say otherwise. Now recognizing this particular domain, area of challenge, the Indian government approached the UK government to provide some support. And as you would appreciate, in many of the UK schools, particularly the government schools, what they call the public schools, are well functioning. The headmasters and the teachers of the public schools, public there is government. The government schools in the UK are paid better than the doctors in their NHS system. So the position accorded to the teachers in the UK is really good. That's because the country recognizes education and teacher education very seriously. So there is an opportunity here for the Open University to bring the best of the expertise, as they demonstrated in South Africa in a recent project, also in Bangladesh, where they are training millions of teachers in English proficiency. They have come to India. Just 2 weeks ago, we got the approval from the Indian government to actually program in 7 states in India, which includes Madhya Pradesh, the other states being Assam, West Bengal, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Orissa, Karnataka. So we would be working with the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and RMSA officials, also working alongside the existing teacher training system in these states to improve the quality of teacher education overall in India. But that doesn't stop us from working with other institutions. we have commitment to work with 7 states in India, but we are also looking for partners in the private sector, among the NGOs, and also actors like the Indira Gandhi National Open University and any other state other than these 7 states would want to take advantage of this approach. So you can see only 4 things we are trying to do. We are trying to put together a network of teacher education organizations so that they can talk to one another, they can collaborate with each other. We are also into developing locally appropriate activity-based, what we call the teacher development units, which would be available to every teacher, 1 million of these, who can actually use as a reference point to teach a particular topic in a subject. So if they are finding it difficult to teach a particular topic in, say, primary science or secondary mathematics, these teacher development units will assist them with films. So somebody this morning was mentioning, beautifully describing how the body parts were taught in a particular school, and this is best practice in a way, because appropriate practice otherwise. It takes account of the resources available within the constraints of that teacher who ought to teach this particular subject or this topic, but with no any object or any aid, teaching, training aid available. So in this case, she used a kind of a sand pit as a good opportunity to explain. So if you go around the country, there are good teachers. Teachers are really good. The problem is the system is not allowing them to perform optimally, and the system has also brought in its own trouble by recruiting a majority of community-based workers as teachers in order to meet the number. So we are in a situation where a large number of teachers, although with good intent to teach, who are dedicated, who are paid very low salaries, yet they are performing. So how we can assist them is by giving them the right kind of material and the teaching aids and the learning methods that they could use in their daily practice appropriately within their conditions. So we are developing, going around and looking for suitable best practices which we film in 2-3 minutes clips, which are embedded into these teacher development units, which are made available to the teacher educators and the teachers themselves, so that they can practice in their daily life. And also, because this is a grant, accountable grant to the UK government, we have a rigorous monitoring and evaluation so that we know for sure, at least in the first phase, we do the job well enough to meet the needs of the demand and the opportunity there exists in India. So I would spend a minute actually showing how our material basically goes around. We develop both audio material as well as video material, which could be put in a kind of a SIM card of a kind of a cheap phone. This is a 790 rupees phone bought at Future Bazaar, one of those stores, where I have put in the kind of English in action samples, which the teachers in Bangladesh are actually using in their daily practice. So I'm actually playing a small clip, a classroom audio, which you can hear.
English in action. English for today. Class 1, Lesson 2, Day 1.
So this is one example of how audio technique is used, and we also have videos that can be uploaded on mobile phones of this nature, which enable teachers at their own leisure to basically play as many number of times possible, which gives them a kind of a teaching method or a technique, discusses their challenge as well as the problems. So the way we organize our teacher development unit is that we pick up a problem and we discuss that problem. We discuss in the context in which people actually now practice, but also we show the alternative methods of teaching through practical examples, which are also available in video format for them to. So all these things complement their existing textbook-based teaching methods. But all that we are trying to do is to help them by picking those most difficult but at the same time most important topics in each of these subjects that the teachers find it difficult to teach, and we treat them with different approaches. And these are made available through the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan to the teachers and teacher educators in multiple formats. If Akhilesh Yadav in UP is going to distribute tablets, we may preload these in tablets. If some other government is giving desktops, so it be. But at the end of the day, we feel that the material electronically produced can travel to teachers at their pace and at their time. They would be in a position to use it. Thank you so much. I'll close it so that I can take it. Okay.
Thank you, Basheerhamad ji. It was really interesting. We'll take questions and queries little later. Now I invite Mr. Rajesh Awasthi, Principal, Choithram School, Indore.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's really difficult to engage people after lunch, and such a delicious lunch. We have to talk about the assessment, and especially the strategies of the alternative assessment. Well, I'll talk in the given time in two blocks. Block number one, let's share what basically we understand assessment is, and in a very simple way, Dr. Veera Gupta explained the difference between the assessment and the evaluation. And what I add to this is that at times the evaluation become more qualitative as compared to the assessment. So if we add a quality to the assessment, it will lead to evaluation. Talking about assessment, let's see what do we understand by the term assessment is. And there are few questions which we need to ask before assessing the students in the class and outside the class also. While going through one of the website, I came across three beautiful questions, and these three questions changed my view about the assessment and what is happening in the class. The first thing is that the first question which was asked in that is, are we teaching what we supposed to teach? Number two is, are students learning what they're supposed to be learning? And number three is, can there be a better way to give the feedback of students' learning? Going through these three questions, the first thing which comes to my mind, and practically all those who are directly involved with the classroom transaction and the students, we always consider assessment and the process of teaching learning in two different pockets. Whenever we talk about the assessment, we always focus on asking questions in any form. And when we talk about teaching and learning, so we are not very clear that what outcome basically we want. Taking the first pocket of teaching and learning, and when we think about the outcome, so that outcome is reflected only in the lesson plan which we are making, a very theoretical lesson plan, that you have the aim, you have the ultimate aim, then you have an objective, you have an ultimate objective, then you have the development of the content, then you have assessment in that, and then the outcome. So basically what happens is that when we start teaching, we don't think about the outcome, and when we start assessing the child, we don't correlate it with the way we have taught. And to my experience, when it comes to the assessment, especially to the examination, teacher become very revengeful to the student. All the intellect of the teacher you can see in the question paper. What is happening in the classroom, that is not reflected in the question paper. So when I want to prove myself as a very good teacher, what should I do? So my focus is that because the question paper is going out in the society, so I'll put all my intellect in the question paper and then put a challenge in front of the students. Now you answer these questions, now I see. So working in two different pockets, not relating the two pockets with each other, leads us nowhere. We talk a lot about assessment. Here we have alternate assessment strategies. But then at many places, I came across alternative assessment, and I failed to understand that what could be the alternative to the assessment. Because the test and all, these are the tools of assessment. So whatever you are doing, if you are looking at the face and making out something about the person, you are in the process of assessment. So how can you have an alternate to that? There is no alternate to the assessment, but yes, there can be different tools, alternate tools for assessing the students. So basically if we see, so the assessment is a process, examination is a tool, and outcome is an objective. The first thing is that after teaching, what my student is going to learn. This is usually what we put in the lesson plan. And then how to get a feedback that how much the student has learned. That is the objective. So after teaching the process of photosynthesis, or after teaching quadratic equations in class 10, what the student is going to learn. Now here, the major problem according to me starts. Because when we design the assessment, basically it is more of, I'm sorry to use the word, my sincere apologies, but it's somewhat, it's an oral diarrhea, where you want everything to be written in the copy, and then you judge that whether the student is good or not. So it is more or less, it's the quantitative part which you are looking for. Whereas the basic objective of the teaching in the class is how the child is able to apply the knowledge gained in the classroom. I mean, this is for what we are teaching. And if I am simply teaching, that the area of a square is A by A, fine. I mean, there is nothing good. And I give some quantity to A by A, it's 2 by 2, So it comes that, okay, fine, it's the 4 square millimeter, 4 square centimeter, whatever the unit is. Whether the purpose is solved? Yes. How? The child learned the formula A by A. But then making the formula or making the child learn the formula is not the objective. The objective is when there is no value given to A by A, will child be able to find out the area? Can we find out the area or the parameter of this hall? Now this is where the application of the knowledge comes in. If there are 10 tiles and one tile is of 12 inches, fine. I mean, you can find out the area of the square. You need not have to measure the length and the breadth. So this is, this should be focused. When we talk about the strategies, somebody was saying in the morning, I think, when biology teacher said that, fine, you fell down on the ground and you teach 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, this is the head, this is the back, this is the leg. So the basic thing what we should keep in mind while designing the strategies for assessment is that what basically you want your child, in what way you want your child to apply the knowledge. If that is not clear, fine, the teaching and learning and the assessment is under the question mark. And this is what is, we call it as the qualitative and the quantitative assessment. There are few types of assessment, 2 categories we'll talk about. Now let's see the tools. We talk a lot about assessment. There are many reforms introduced by various boards in the country on assessment. CBSE being national board introduced CCE. Then Madhya Pradesh government is also now taking up the CCE project to implement it. And then like this, all these state boards, they have adopted these pattern. Now review this, especially the system of the CCE. So the idea given by all the boards on CCE was that there should be an assessment which is very comprehensive, which is on a regular basis, and it should be qualitative. So the evaluation comes into the picture. And how this was defined by schools? It has to be regular. So how to maintain the regularity? So let's fix up the day. Monday. Okay, fine. So let's make it Monday test. So the regularity is maintained. So every Monday we are taking a test and the regularity. Then make it comprehensive. So when we are doing formative assessment, let's give 15 to 20 tasks. And then out of that, those 15 to 20 tasks, we'll choose the best 2. And then so it has become the comprehensive. But then the evaluation is not at all considered as evaluation. The evaluation, that E, is defined as examination. So instead of becoming a continuous and the comprehensive evaluation, it has become a continuous and the comprehensive examination. Who is going to, when you go out and when you have to purchase some ready-made for you, some clothes for you, what we do? We take a trial, whether it fits us or not. And when you ask the salesman over there, he'll suggest that you better go for the trial because different companies, they have got different size scales. So maybe 32 of X company and 34 of X company will fit you. 32 of X company will not fit you. 32 of Y company may fit you. And everybody is kicking that person. And that is the student. So we talk about student-centered teaching, we talk about student-centered learning, we talk about the student-centered evaluation system. But that centeredness is not decided by the student. It is decided by the teacher. So as a teacher, I fix up that you have to be here. This is the best way I know that you will be able to learn. Yeah, fine, true. You may have out of your own experience that how the process of learning takes place. But then, it's not that one size fits for all. It's not there in the system. So let's see that how can we design the tool. We take examination as a tool. What happens in the examination? You may disagree to my statement. I'm a strong critic of the examination system. I don't have any alternative, so don't ask me question on that. Right? I make it very clear. The thing is that actual teaching periods we get in a year is around 150. 150 to 160. Actual where teaching is happening in the classroom. We have around 215, 220 working days. Then some days goes for examination, some days unseen holidays, 10 days teacher is on the leave throughout the session. So actual 150. And if we take one class equals to 40 minutes. So you have got around 15 into 4, 6,000 minutes to teach in a year. Now let's see the examination system. 3 major examinations, say quarterly, half yearly, and now it's 2, the summative examination if we talk about. The duration of the examination, maximum 3 hours. So it's 6 hours. 6 hours, that means 3,600 minutes. You take 6,000 minutes to teach the child in the classroom, and you expect to return it back in 50% of that time. Where is the justification? Why? Because the tools which the schools, teachers are adopting, it's more on the comfort of the teacher, not on the comfort of the student. And another thing which surprises me in the examination pattern, examination system is that when we talk about examination, we are mainly focused what is written in the 4-line answer. You know that the child is very good, but that goodness is never considered. Because you have to give marks to what is written in the answer sheet, not what is there in the brain of the child. So let's think it over. I don't know what could be the alternative to this. There could be n number of ways where we can go for, as far as the individual teacher or the individual school is concerned. But as a system, that where you say that the assessment which you are following is the student-friendly assessment. It is nowhere the student-friendly assessment. Formative assessment. Nowadays, all these terms when comes out, they becomes the buzzword. We have been doing formative assessment for ages, years. It's not something which has come up now. Because, it has become an official word, so we have started using and understanding, the CCE. We have been doing since years. The only thing is that it was the shape and the size was different. Now the packing is different. So when you talk about the formative assessment, learning, conducting activity in the class, how we conduct the activity in the class, we decide. How many times, when we go to the children that, this is what is the activity designed for, let's discuss what we can do. I know, n number of questions will be raised, n number of excuses will be made. Time is not there. Principal doesn't allow. Principal says that system doesn't allow. Then there are 35 students in the class. How can we have 35? Lot many things comes up. Not because, these are the practical problems, but it is because that we are not ready to accept the alternatives. We are ready to talk on the alternatives, but then we are not ready to generate and accept the generated alternatives. So the first thing when we talk about the alternative strategies, let's start accepting what alternatives are. And then think that how this can be administered in the classes. You know, there are n number of things. The school where I come from, we do not conduct examinations till class 5. There's no examination system. But then all the parents, there are around 1400, 1500 parents, they all are very happy. Nobody asks for the examination. Why? Because the feedback which is given to the parent, that feedback is, you know, actually what the child is doing in the school and at the home matches with that. So how we did it and all these things, it will be a different thing. But then what I would like to say here is that let's take assessment in different categories. Whether you want the assessment in terms of the marks, whether you want assessment in terms of the grades, or whether you want in terms of the skills attained by the student while classroom transactions. We were having marks, so there was a lot of stress that, you know, it's 94 and 94.2 makes a lot of difference. So we shifted to grades. But, you know, what happens if a child, if I say that there is a grade card where in English the child has got B, he has got B plus in Hindi, he got A in mathematics, he got C in science, and he got again B in social science. If this is the grade card, how we are going to define the child? No. So that those the grades which are given, that grade card is also not the reflection of the mental personality of the child. But it's a system we have to follow. But then, can there be an alternative? Yes, definitely. What? Shifting from this to the skills, attainment of skills. And every subject has got some basic concept and some basic skills. Let's see very quickly that what is the basic concept of teaching language or languages. We have got 2-3 language formula. It is to develop the expression. Mathematics, to develop the logic. Social science, coordination with the society and the nature, human relations. Science, observation and analysis. These are the very basic concept with the child. What you have studied when you were in class 8 in English, you don't know. But then you have learned how to express yourself. So whether I learn Shakespeare or whether I learn anything in English language or Tulsidas ji in Hindi or Acharya Ramjagatra Shukla in Hindi doesn't make any difference unless and until I know how to communicate my feelings in a proper way. So the teaching which was there in the class, I mean, I have wasted the time there. Why? Because I am not able to speak. There are teachers, you know, come across, you know, MA in English literature and they know everything other than English. It happens. We come across so many things. So what is the use of teaching language? You cannot express. Nothing is illogical. That's why the application of mathematics is there. I simply asked one of the engineers that, can you tell me that how, you know, the coordinate geometry helps in flying the plane? Okay, fine. It is the loci. So these are the things, you know, which we should keep in mind when we are developing the strategies for the alternatives to the assessment. And let's focus on the skills, not focus on the grades or the numbers. And the same should be reported. Maybe the listening, reading, writing, speaking skills in English language, the application of logic, what we said in the other subjects. So if we really wish learning to happen in the classroom and learning to be reflected by the child, by the students, then we need to shift to the skill. I mean, there are two ways. One is the norm reference assessment. One is the criterion referenced assessment. These are two different. But however, I extend my sincere thanks for the organizers giving me an opportunity to talk to such learned people here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajesh Awasthi ji. It was very, very informative talk and your experiences from the field. Now I invite Mr. Mohit Yadav, Director, Besant School, Indore.
A very warm good afternoon to everybody. Honorable Dr. Veera Gupta. I think ma'am and sir has already talked quite in length about assessment and evaluation, and which is very truly spoken. Things are very true that we have been doing assessment and evaluation since ages. The only thing is things are changing and we need to keep on change. My experience in this industry has been just small. I have been 12 years of experience in this industry of education, and it's predominantly for the school education's last 8-10 years only. But over the period of time, I have been thinking again and again, and what we have understood over the time is that every child, every individual has got different capacity, different traits. They have got different abilities. Probably there may be a child who's having a good learning ability. He is able to read, learn fast, and remit it back. There may be a child who is not good in writing or communicating it back, but he is able to understand. He is able to relate it to the world. There can be another child who is having not much interest in science, not much interest in language or anything else, and he is good only in solving with the numbers. Different traits, different abilities. And then, as a teachers, as a principals, we define a single system. The teacher goes into the class, he starts teaching. We have got one method, the lecture methods. The lectures we keep on delivering. Different ways we deliver. And then we expect that let's have an evaluation of a student by giving one examination, 3 hours, and take the feedback. Let the student write the answer. Very truly said, 6,000 minutes to be remitted back in 3,000 minutes. Not possible. Number one. Number two, I have a different ability. My child, I was not good in communication. I was not able to write it much. So I have written an answer in only 3 lines, probably just a gist of the answers. The other child who was very good in ratifying, so he just mugged it up and wrote the complete answer that was taught by the teacher, and he got 10 out of 10. And probably this child who was just having just a brief idea about it, he just wrote in 3 lines. So teacher said, oh, just 3 lines? So 3 marks only out of 10. He was failed. Let me share an example in these circumstances. I had just an experience that in one of my school, in a class, the teacher has taught the science, and she was just taking a retest from the students, and she asked the students to write the definition of evaporation. Now every child started writing it on the copy. Tuck, 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 tuck. There was a child who was sitting in the front bench, and he didn't wrote anything on the answer sheet. Nothing. He was blank. Teacher asked, why are you not writing the evaporation? Don't you know the definition of it? Well, I know it. Well, why don't you write it? Well, I don't feel I can write what I know it. Teacher said, no, it is not possible. If you know it, you can write it. So he said, no, ma'am, I cannot write what I know it. So she said that probably you may not be knowing what exactly the evaporation is all about. So he said, no, I know it, ma'am. I know whatever. Whatever the other child, Rohan, has written, I know what evaporation is. He has written the definition, but I know what is evaporation. So she said, okay, tell me, what do you mean by evaporation? How do you want to express yourself? He took the bottle, he put down his finger into the bottle, took a drop of water on his finger, and started blowing for a minute. The drop was gone. And he said, this is evaporation for me. Now the teacher was in a dilemma. Whether the student is right, whether the students who have written the answers in length, they are right, whether I am supposed to give marks to this student, or whether I am supposed to give marks to those students who have written the answers. Now there the difference lies between evaluation and assessment. The big difference. We have been talking much upon evaluation and assessment. So in just short, I am saying what we mean by evaluation is that normally evaluation focuses on grades, the marks. It reflects the classroom components other than the course content and mastery level. We just talk about the evaluations. We just ask the students to write the answers, we evaluate it, we give them marks, and then the evaluation has been done. Now when we talk about assessment, it has been years long. We have been doing the assessments. If you look at back the history, we have been getting the report cards that in our times we used to get 20 years back. It used to contain a column at the end, remarks by the class teacher, subject teacher, and the principals. And this remarks used to be only at the two examination, half yearly and the yearly examination. Probably these were the remarks that teachers or the principal or the subject teachers used to give on the basis of their assessment, whatever they have observed with the child over a 6 months or 3 months time period. They have observed, they have understood, and whatever their observation has been, they have just put it into the mere words to the student. That has been the previous assessments. But now, in the current scenario, the things have changed. So assessment has become a more important tool for us because as a teachers, we are expected that we are not supposed to give only the knowledge, just not the literacy to the students, but we are supposed to create a student, create a citizen for the nation who is equally developed, who can relate the knowledge that has been imparted to him into the real sense. The real sense means to the world, to the contacts, to the real amenities, things that he is working, things that are working around us here and there, to the nearby areas. He can relate to these things. If that is the job, are we really doing it? As a teachers, are we really doing it? At times I find the answer is not yes. It is not yes. Because the teachers, most of the time, whether it's a very good schools or normal schools or average school, teachers are busy in completing the courses only. The courses is that much. It's a big course. It's a big textbook that has been prescribed. And as a teachers, we are just busy in completing this course. On top, when these are new methodologies, new changes that are coming into the picture, we are asked to incorporate these changes also along with the courses. The teacher finds it more difficult. Oh, yeah. Till now I was getting 150 lectures to complete my course. Now I'm getting even not 120 lectures because 30 lectures goes in doing the activities, different activities. How I am supposed to make the things go along with each other, course as well as the activities. And on top, these days the teachers in the classroom are replaced with the digital boards. No more chalkboards. The teacher is supposed to use the digital board also along with the teaching so that the teaching becomes more interestful. The teacher is confused on one hand. Look at the teacher sides. Teachers are confused. They are supposed to get things done. And on the other hand side, we are expecting everything out of him. Things are still same. What we need to do is change. The real assessment comes where we can focus upon our learning, teaching and its outcomes. Basically, our assessment should be in such a manner that it may help the student, the learner, in a real manner understand what he is learning, how he is learning, and to what level he is able to learn. And is there any scope of improvising in him or her for learning these habits, learning these things. For the faculty, it should be a feedback where they can understand exactly how they should be teaching to the students and how they can improvise the classroom environment. This is what assessment should be all about. Now, when we talk about these things, there are various factors which comes into picture. These are like what assessment? Assessment of what? And if we are doing the assessments, then in which manner? So I've just jotted out few things that if we are doing assessment, if we are giving it something to the teachers, then there has to be certain features of our assessment. Let's define these features. Since the time is short, I'll be just taking a small, quick through the things. That assessment should be based on authentic tasks that demonstrates the learner's ability to accomplish the goals. If we are having certain goals in ourselves, the assessment should be in such a manner that it should be able to demonstrate the learner's ability. Whatever we want to train them, they should be able to do. The instructor and learners focus on understanding. They should focus on the understanding of the topic, but not on the right and wrong answers. What we believe right now is whether the answer is right or the answer is wrong. It should not be that focus. Our focus should be whether the student have understood or not. And if he or she has understood, then whether they are able to come back with the answer, whether they are able to communicate it back or not. The learners should be helped to set the criteria for successful completion of task. And the learners have the opportunity to assess themselves and their peers. This is the main feature. Our assessment should be something like this, where the learners should have the opportunity to assess themselves and their peers where they stand. It's not a competitive world. That we cannot say that it's not a competitive world. It is a competitive world. So they have to compare themselves with the peers also. So that is what is required. If we go about with these things, then we have to set some criteria that while building an assessment, there have to be certain criteria that can be made. These criteria should be like, these assessments should be built on around the topics or issues of the interest to the students. Very correctly said by Awasthi sir, that we don't ask students what is their interest. We just go and tell them this is what we are supposed to do. An activity in an assessment, formative assessment that we are these days doing, we just go and tell these are the 10 activities which you are supposed to do, and out of those 10 activities we ask student to, we get the student assessed on 2 or 3 activities and give them the grades. But we never ask a student that what exactly they wish to do. So they build around the topics or issues that interest to the students. If we are planning a good assessments in the schools, this should be the first criteria. They should be replicate real-world communication contexts and situations. Third, they should require the learners to produce quality product or performance. That is the most important thing. The criteria and standards should be known to the student. If we are doing the assessment, let the student be known on what grounds he or she would be assessed, so that at least he is clear in his mind. Why? Because when we talk about evaluation, there is a question and the paper setter, he has or she has already made a model answer of it, and it is expected that according to this model answer, the marks are supposed to be given. The student was not known. Had it been known a model answers could be like this, he could have prepared more better answer to that. But that answer was not known to him. Here, probably the assessment criteria, if he or she is known to that, he is exposed to those assessment criteria, probably he or she would be able to perform more better. Much better performances could be expected from the students. These assessment criteria should involve interaction between assessor and the person assessed, and they should be allowed for self-evaluation and self-correction as they proceed. Self-correction is very much important, because when we assess, the feedback has to be given, and on the basis of this feedback, the feedback has to be given. The feedback should be in such a manner that a student should be able to correct himself so that he can make it right things. The various assessment techniques that we are talking these days is that we are doing different activities. Some of the activities that we are using in our schools is, I mentioned these 4 activities, that is retellings, portfolios, group activity, and activity log. Time is short, so I won't be doing much into this. Retellings in which we ask the student to remit it back, probably in such a manner so that a student may feel that the people sitting in front of them are not aware of that topic. They are supposed to come back in their own ways of telling. Portfolios, the teachers are supposed to make, in which we ask the teachers to make a portfolio of the student for the year-round activity, for the year-round whatever things have been given to him, different things that have to be maintained. The group activities that we have incorporated for various subjects that are included for the portfolio designing, where we understand how the students have been performing, and the activity logs. This is different from portfolio because the activities that we give in formative assessments are number of activities. Out of those activities, what all activities the student has taken and how well he has performed, that entire activity log has to be taken care of. Second thing, how those activities were taken by the student. The most important, how those activities were taken by the student. That is what we take care of these things. Quickly, I'll come down to the end. And my few things, when we talk about alternative assessment and implementation of those assessment techniques, we are supposed to take care of these few things, that as a teachers, we should give time to students before implementing it. Because students are not exposed to these kind of assessments in earlier years. These are the new techniques that we are going to implement in time to come, or we are implementing with the CBSE boards and right now. So time should be given to the students to understand these activities, the system. Because unless and until we don't give time to the students, they won't be able to perform. Teachers should make learners understand the right meaning of assessments. The planning of assessment in a proper manner. That is the next very important thing that we have talked about. The criteria of assessment should change with the subjects. Every subject would have different criteria for assessment. It should not be common. We cannot give it as a common thing that, okay, these activities you are supposed to perform and you have to complete. No, the subjects changes, the criteria changes. And never be prejudiced. This is one of the most important thing that we need to tell our teachers. So said, because while assessing the student, most of the time what happens, the prejudiceness of the teacher with the student comes into the picture, because it's a human assessment. It's not mechanical assessment. There is no fixed format. We need to assess the student with the rapport that he or she is holding with us. However, whatever activities they have done, according to that we are supposed to do it. I said assessment or evaluation, I think both are required because it's a competitive world. Till 10th we need to assess, but 11th, 12th, ma'am said evaluation is must because they are going to be selected by the various organizations. So both are required as done by CBSE with FAs and SAs. Assessment should be formative and evaluation should be summative, one said. Summative evaluation should be such that they incorporate the outcomes of formative assessment. This is the link between evaluation and assessment that I feel. That if the evaluations, summative exams, should be in such a manner where we can incorporate the outcomes of formative assessments, that would be the right manner. And using the value-based questions, reason-based questions, real-world based questions, like where we can give the examples and we can ask the students to explain them or whatever they feel they can be right in summative exams, can be the new methods of evaluation, just not the direct questions or answers to the things. I would just conclude with this thing, that in time to come down, the evaluation process has to be in such a manner that it becomes more of assessment, so that the examination does not become scoring just a grade or marks, but a tool for teachers to understand his or her students, for the students a better way to understand themselves. Thank you very much. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Mohit. Now we are left with two speakers and just 5 minutes to go. So my request is we better keep to time, otherwise if you want we can be here till midnight, no issues. So both the speakers, just shorten it a little bit so that we get little time for question answer. Otherwise, question answer will not be there at all. I invite the next speaker, Dr. Michelle Harnar, Mosaic Network, US.
The one larger, it's the Harnar. Do you want to find it? Go back to the, no. Go back to the list. Harnar. Yes. Nope. Yep. Harnar. There you go. Thank you. Well, I was going to put a timer up, but I guess I won't do that, right? Because I'm going to go faster than we had thought, or that I thought. I thought I was going to give 10 minutes. So I am quite new to your education system. I've been learning quite a bit about it in the time that I've been here. So I am not going to stand up here and tell you that I have new and innovative ways that you must apply. But if you'll indulge me, what I will do is introduce you to a couple of lines of research and activity that I've seen in the U.S. that might in some ways reflect or you might find value in. So I'll talk a little bit about something we're calling transformative participatory evaluation, and then I will move into a science integration in a K-5 education program that I was involved in evaluating in California. So just briefly, we talk about participatory evaluation. You've talked quite a bit about evaluation and assessment and the differences between the two. We talk very much about evaluation more in the broader scheme of things, much grander than just looking just at one context. And so we also talk very much about the fact that if evaluation is done well, most times it has some sort of participatory element. And those choices are where we start to define how we talk about participatory evaluation. This is a popular graph and figure that is used when we talk about participatory processes, and we talk about them across three major dimensions, and that is the selection of the people who are involved in that process, so your selection of your stakeholders, the depth of their involvement in that process, and then the control over the evaluation as it goes forward. Is it entirely in the hands of the evaluator, or is it really entirely in hands of the people who are most impacted by the program and the evaluation, or the curriculum and the evaluation? And so most every evaluation you engage in, you can place somewhere on this particular graph if you are at all involving stakeholders in your evaluation. So this is a way that we talk about our participatory processes in evaluation. So one of the research processes that I was involved in asks about when you get stakeholders involved, what outcomes of that process? Why do you involve them? Therefore, what are you trying to get out of that? So what are those processes? What do you do to ensure stakeholder involvement, and what outcomes do you intend to create? So that was the question behind this particular line of research. So what we did is we actually asked evaluators all over the world to use an online mapping system that took 27 variables all on the left-hand side that were related to evaluation, and we asked them to map their process around this very center one, which says stakeholder involvement. So they could drag their processes in, they could draw an arrow from one to the other, and in the end, this would be their depiction of what they do on the left, so to speak, and what they get on the right. So a left-to-right process. And what we got from this large sample of people from around the world is this sort of mapping of what their participatory processes look like. And so if you notice that up in the upper right-hand corner here, shared understanding was the most important outcome that people talked about in their involvement of stakeholders in the process evaluation. They involved people so that when they were in that process, they were developing a shared understanding of the program, the process, and their roles in that process. And I could probably spend another day on this, but I won't because I have 5 minutes or less, right? So what I'll do is I'll just briefly touch on a couple of the top most important links that were mentioned by this sample. at least a quarter of them agreed, more than a quarter agreed that stakeholder involvement to shared understanding, you saw that link, was the most important. The next most important was they involved stakeholders because of the diverse perspectives that they provided to the process. I think that, to me, is one of the most important pieces of the process. You bring them to the table because of their perspective. It helps inform the process. And then stakeholder, I skip over the develop judgments and report and disseminate because that's much more of a process-oriented thing. But I think the stakeholder involvement to building capacity, we involve them because we want them to learn what evaluation is like and how they might participate in it themselves and how they might take it on themselves. And then the last one I have highlighted, I wanted to bring our attention to, is this use of local program knowledge. The reason we involve stakeholders is because, as an evaluator, I may not be embedded in their culture and their program and their processes to know what are the nuances of that process. So I involve them, or these people involve them, because we want to use that local program knowledge. So essentially, that's one way of thinking about evaluation from a participatory approach when you decide on who to involve in your process and for the reasons for which you do it. So that's one particular piece that I thought that you might indulge my interest in providing it to you. So what I'll do is this other topic that I want to talk about is something that actually happened in a set of California schools. There is, throughout the U.S., not in every school, but sporadically across schools, there is this FOSS, Full Option Science System, which is essentially kits, boxes, full of materials that are placed into a K-5 school, and those have all the materials one might need to do science projects and do experiments and things like that. And so those are placed throughout throughout schools. And they found, they've been in classes, I think, about 15 years they've been in the California system, and they've been neglected. They're not used much. Why? Because we've really moved into a high-stakes testing environment where the students are being tested on those things that hit the highest marks for their grades, mostly their language acquisition, English language learning. About 33% of our population in California was not born in the U.S. So we have a large population of, in that number, that's a pretty large population. And so they're in our schools, and they're learning English usually as a second language. Right? So that's the high-stake testing. So what happens? They avoid talking about or spending time on science because they don't have time to, because they're teaching to the test. We talked a little bit about that here. I heard a little bit about that in your presentations. So a bunch of people who were involved in designing FOSS 20-plus years ago decided to try something new. And so they got a grant from the University of California, Berkeley, which happens to be where they also were employed. But they got almost $1 million to start a learning academy, where what they did is they brought in teachers from a bunch of K-5 schools into this academy. And the academy essentially was a 1-week summer and 3 weekends a year where they would get together as a team and they would talk about what they're doing in their classrooms. And what their goal was to go back to their schools and develop grade-level teams where they would talk about how they could integrate science into their mainstream curriculum of language learning. And so science integration was what they were looking to do. Bring science into language learning so that if they have a grammar class, they're talking about a science topic during grammar class. And so their hope was that they would have some sort of impact in test scores beyond language arts. And so what I was doing, and I won't spend much more time on it, but I just wanted to introduce you to the idea that what I was doing as the evaluator is I was observing classrooms, and I was observing the kind of activities that were going on at these elementary schools. And so a lot of what was happening were these science nights, where they would have 4 classrooms open, and there would be 3 to 5 teachers in each classroom doing some sort of science experiment. And the kids would bring their parents, and they would roam from classroom to classroom to classroom and participate in these science experiments. Well, not only did it introduce the kids that maybe hadn't been to that particular class, but it also introduced their parents to science. So all of a sudden the parents started getting involved in their education of their kids. And it didn't take a lot of money and it didn't take a lot of time, but the teachers were engaged enough that they were at all of these science nights. And that was actually one of the outcomes that we saw from this Leadership Academy, was that there was an increase in these science nights, and there was an increase in the teachers getting involved in science night and then integrating science into their classrooms. And so I just have a couple of images of what it looks like. This is some teachers, you know. What they also did is if a child came to a table and participated in a science experiment, he or she carried a little brown paper bag with a little piece of paper on it, and if the teacher put a stamp on it, and the kid got 4 stamps, then they didn't have to bring their homework in for like 2 more days. So there was a little bit of an incentive for that, right? So essentially, this is what it was. And then I went to this open house where it was on a Saturday, and this was their gymnasium in the school. And it was packed with students and their families for 7 hours. That they were just coming and going and coming and going, and kids were showing off their own posters and science projects, and they were doing the experiments like the science nights. And so this whole integration, we don't know if they're going to roll this academy out larger. You know, it's very hard to track these kinds of numbers, to give some sort of evaluation numbers that then help them get another $1 million to invest in, 5 other school districts. But essentially, it was an idea that they're right now actually in that place where they're looking at our evaluation report and saying, okay, so where do we go next with this? Can we scale it up? Can we replicate it? And how much does it take? And how engaged do we have to be? And what's it going to cost? So that. This is a fun one. They had a little pie tin, and they put paint in it, and then they dropped a marble in. And their goal was to move that around and learn what it was like to shift and move the marble on balance. And so there was a science around that. And so they were making their own paintings with the marble and paint. That's it.
Thank you, Michelle. It was certainly very brief and very informative. May I now invite Mr. Yogendra Singh, Principal, Mount Litra G Group, Bhopal. So the speaker is not present here. Now the forum is open for 2 questions. So anybody, only 2 people can ask 2 questions or observations. Anyone wants to share? Yes. Do it.
We have well said, but its implementation part of it, I was thinking. In the Indian situation, how far will we bring it? Where we have got from class 1 to 5, 1 teacher or 2 teachers. The class is not a homogeneous situation. It's a heterogeneous one. Students from different background. We are talking about assessment. In the final analysis, as I would say that the assessment should be self-assessment. As sir said, one is not able to articulate properly. I know many things, and my articulation or my communication is not always that very effective. But that doesn't mean that I have not grasped the situation or things what is being communicated. And the teacher or the evaluator is going to look at what I have been able to reproduce it. That also in such a manner where she would understand, not in according to my capacity. So in these situations, all what we can say is that, assessment we say, it's practical side of it. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to? Yeah.
Just a quick comment, actually, the way I have interpreted the different sessions that I saw. So ma'am, thank you so much for your question. It was so grounded in, one way when Mohit was speaking, who's a dear friend, junior from school. Hi Mohit, nice to see you after 15, 20 years. So basically, from the very grounds level, you know the realities. Right? There are the differences, सब में इतने disparities हैं, and if you have to scale it across schools, then all the schools, there are those differences as well. Having said that, it's my understanding, and I have a question for you, Michael, so let me lead up to that. And it's my understanding that assessments, when done right, all the science and research that has happened on assessments and evaluation in general in the last 40 years, I, who has spent most of my time in both the worlds, developing and developed, in the field of education and social services, there are not many differences. Things that you were talking about, the challenges that Mohit was talking about, are exactly the challenges that you can go to Europe they were facing. You can read a study from Singapore, they were doing that. In Australia, they're doing that. And then, of course, in the US. So from that perspective, Michael, you gave such a nice perspective from California, from theory perspective. If you can somehow please elaborate on the point that how the science can be taken down to the grounds level to actually address these practical things. It's not adding on to the work, but essentially helping them standardize instead, right? Because a good assessment indeed lets you take this art out of the assessment part, isn't it? So can you elaborate more on that? How have you seen evaluation implemented in a practical sense across challenging environments, if you will? And how would you apply it to, although you have been in India just for a week, how would you apply it to Indian context?
Oh, that's good. Now you added that last one on there. When I was listening to you speak and when I was listening to some of the other speakers talk, one of the things that came really home for me is what I was reading very recently on, there's a whole Society for the Teaching of English to Those Who Speak Other Languages, the TESL. And one of the main things that they talk about in their pedagogy is actually making the pedagogy obvious to the learner. So that when you take them through an exercise, you actually say to them, here's where we're going. And this is how we're going to get there. We're going to learn this, and then I'm going to get you to repeat it. And then we're going to learn this, and then I'm going to get you to repeat it. And then you're going to do this paperwork, and the reason you're doing this is because it gives you this grasp of the language. And I think that that is universal. And that can be done in any context, as long as it's clear. And, as teachers, you know that what you're doing. It's all clear in your pedagogy. You've made these choices, that you put these things in place because you want them to do this, because you know it's going to work, if they take it on and they do it. So for me, I think that that's as close as I can get to really answering your question, Prashant, is actually bringing it down to that, what I like to say is the actual theory of change, and making that theory of change explicit to those who are involved in that change, so that when they're in it, they can be more reflective. There was one of the slides that I saw at the very bottom that said, making it so that the assessment could be self-reflective. And that's where it was for me, is making it so that the self-reflection is embedded within that process, so that they understand what it is they're doing and why they're doing it, so that they can engage in that process in a way that makes sense to them and that they can own it. So that you're not making them you're not trying to motivate them, you're actually allowing them to motivate themselves because they know why they're doing it.
Now I request Dr. Veera Gupta to kindly present a token of thanks to our eminent speakers. Ma'am, please present a token of thanks to Dr. Basheerhamad. Now I request Dr. Veera Gupta to present a token of thanks to Mr. Rajesh Awasthi. Now I request Dr. Veera Gupta to present a token of thanks to Mr. Mohit Yadav. Now I request Dr. Veera Gupta to present a token of thanks to Dr. Michael Harnar.